One of the best things about collecting Yu-Gi-Oh! Welcome to the Solemn Yu-Gi-Oh! Channel, where I discuss everything collecting and investing in Yu-Gi-Oh! Today we discuss the really big divide we have in MTG primarily, where the collector's market sometimes isn't as fun for the player market. So what do I mean by this? If you don't know what the reserved list is, essentially in the early 90s, at one point WotC just printed certain stuff into oblivion, and so a lot of collections lost value, a lot of people got mad, and as a response Wizards made a list that said these cards will never be reprinted, and that way your collection can remain valuable, or at least those cards will. Now for the collectors who then bought those cards at that point and kept them, this has been great. A lot of these cards have gone up and they have been very confident that they will, remain valuable in some way. Now, from a player perspective, some players are angry. They are saying, oh, this is bullshit, because some of these cards, like maybe a Black Lotus or the Moxes or whatever, are so powerful and necessary even to play some of my favorite formats, maybe a Vintage or a Legacy or whatever. And so they're angry, There's certain cards worth tens of thousands or just thousands, depending on condition and so forth, that we will never be able to play with. And these collectors and investors, the evil investors, are ruining that for us. Again, I'm not taking a side here. I don't really care. I don't play Magic beyond my casual Commander fun, but you get the argument, right? On one hand, you have people who don't want their collections to drop to zero because the printing machines go burr. But on the other hand, you have people who go like, well, these cards are inaccessible for us. Now, many people have given certain arguments. Oh, they could print these with different borders, so they're not the same, or they could print this and they could do that. Sure. But the really cool thing is, in Yu-Gi-Oh! We don't have this, We have cards worth thousands. We have PSA graded cards selling for insanely high prices. And none of this impacts players in any way. There's some nut jobs like me who have ridiculous figures in Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards stored at banks and so forth. And we get to enjoy these cards like, oh wow, this card is, I don't know, how much is it? Is it 1,000? Whatever. This card is this much. And I'm not really taking away a card from someone who could play with it. Someone can literally grab a common change of heart, I don't know why, because it's banned, but they can grab a common change of heart of a few cents and still play with it, and I'm not affected, People buy this card because of the collector's value. People buy this card because it's, they grew up with it, they want the original, it's really pretty, look at the foil, oh, it's from MRD, it's a first edition, it's a PSA, wow. A collector or an investor can enjoy this card and its value, and the player can just grab another one. Walmart sells reprints of MRD and LOB and all of these packs constantly, just constantly. And they will destroy the value over and over and over and over of all these unlimps. And so players can keep on opening it, enjoy the experience, put the cards in their decks. Awesome. Awesome stuff. And again, I may unbox some of these very, very valueless packs because you do get to experience that nostalgia. So the collector or investor market can exist. These cards can go up, and yet not a single player or cheaper collector, someone who just wants the cards and doesn't want to, spend instant thousands, still have access to all the other cards. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a best of both worlds scenario. If you want a cheap SDK Blue Eyes art, there are plenty of those out there. But if you want the best of the best, that card still has insane amounts of value. And that's just fascinating to me. In Pokemon, it's not as pronounced. You have the same thing kind of where, most Pokemon cards that are valuable are old ones that aren't even relevant because Pokemon kind of disregards a lot of its expanded format, which is really sad. But beyond that, Pokemon's player base isn't even that relevant compared to their collector base, Pokemon mostly just has a lot of wild collectors and kids buying product. And so regardless of what they do versus player base, it doesn't really matter. So that's great. But, it's not comparable to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic in that regard, in my opinion. Yu-Gi-Oh!, just like Magic, has more focus on players than collectors. And so it's very interesting that despite that focus on collectors really hasn't ruined players. Now, sure, there are buyouts and there are people, trying to do the stonks moves on market watches and trying to do the stonks moves and, making certain cards artificially more expensive. But that never really comes from the collector's market. Sure, you had that first Maximum Gold Blue Eyes buyout and you had other buyouts of like collector-like cards, but at no point was a player really fucked over because of a collector or investor in the vintage cards. that just doesn't exist. And that just fascinates me, you know. I don't want to make this video too long because I would just keep on repeating myself, but I feel that's a good thing. It means we never have this animosity, you know. A player doesn't feel bad about collectors, and a collector doesn't feel bad about players. And so a player can much more easily become a collector because he doesn't have that bad feeling, and a collector can much more easily become a player because they don't have that bad feeling. If you are the type of person who plays Magic and for years you have been mad at the reserved list and reserved list collectors, it is much harder to buy your own reserved list card and watch it appreciate because you're like, well, I don't want to be part of the people I thought were scumbags. So there's this little hurdle you need to get over. And in Yu-Gi-Oh, that's not the case. I really think we're gonna have so many more people from the player base still interested in the collector part because we never had that war. We never had that divide. And that's just exciting, you know. Sometimes you gotta be positive. I think that's a really good thing. So yeah, hope you found it interesting. Like, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.